said today it didn't have to be this bad.
We've done worse than most any other country. And we're a highly developed, rich country. We were saying we could get as high as 240,000, and people were thinking we were being hyperbolic about it. And now here we are with 500,000 deaths, just a stunning figure.
Today, as you probably know, we crossed another grim milestone in the United States as we passed 500,000 deaths from COVID-19. This number is incomprehensible to me, as in so large I'm not sure how to even begin to understand it. And yet, as I was scrolling through my news feeds, the first thing that I saw was news about Trump's tax returns and then the virus. Why? Why would algorithms prioritize that? It seems to me because our media landscape prioritizes the sensational over the real, and that is relevant to this number. In the press coverage today, experts have said it didn't have to be this bad. But if the virus is itself deadly, how do we make sense of that? If we want to understand 500,000, we have to understand that truth gets retweeted less than terror, that misinformation is almost as dangerous to Americans as the virus itself. We need a way to understand the media landscape that we are in right now, and rather than just make that case outright, I want to look to a man who understood this and, had he been alive, may have seen this coming.
Last month, a 13-year-old boy abducted an 8-year-old girl, and when people asked him why, he said he learned about it on TV. Something different to try, he said. Life's cheap. What does it matter? Well, life isn't cheap.
Turning to Mr. Rogers to talk about media might seem like an odd move. He is usually associated with emotional intelligence and compassion, not incisive critiques of the media landscape. But as we saw in the last video, he intuitively understood the accelerating power and potential of media. He knew it could be used for much good, or it could be used to degrade humanity. Famously, he testified at the Senate in defense of public funding for media, which he knew was instrumental to keeping the integrity of the media landscape intact. This is big. We'll come back to this. For now, Fred Rogers was known for the healing power of his authentic attention, but the internet age has commodified attention and sold it to the highest bidder. That, or it's been stolen by those who have a talent for attracting attention to themselves. So actually, let's start with this guy known as the shaman. I've blurred his face because while what he represents is incredibly important, he himself is largely a distraction. His overly circulated image obscured the reality of what happened on January 6th in the early reporting. As we'll see, in the Twitter media landscape, the shaman's horns are to the Capitol riots what the Capitol riots are to the virus. When I checked the news, Trump's tax returns obscured the 500,000 sensationalism, distracted from something actually deadly. In Rome in the 1970s, kids would surround a tourist. The one in front would have a flower he would try to hand you. The kids on the sides would wave newspapers and cardboard in the air. They surround you, then disappear. While your senses were overwhelmed, the kids in the back had reached into your pockets and taken your money. The shaman is the kid with the flower, a focal point of attention. The Capitol rioters are surrounding us. The virus is behind. But robbery is a poor analogy for murder. It's more like the glowing light on the deep ocean fish. The light attracts our eyes behind our teeth. The shaman is an intellectual distraction from what is really happened. He is spectacle. He is novelty. It is the same with this grinning idiot walking out of the building with the podium. The same with this man with his feet up on the desk. I want to be respectful of the dead, but these goons and their ridiculous imagery are newspaper waving in the air when just a few 100 feet away, the others were beating a police officer to death. If horns and podiums are the images you take away from the Capitol riots, then you've walked away from a murder remembering not the man on the street, but the weather and the background music. You've missed the whole thing. Glowing light, teeth, chomp. All over the national discussion right now is misinformation. I hate this word. It is so passive. Everyone gets to be misinformed, and no one has to be a liar, a manipulator, a con.
Are the words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down. A lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat.
We're in very good shape.
I think it's going to work out fine.
Very well under control in our country. I think that's a problem that's going to go away.
It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
We only have 15 people, and they're getting better.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. And this is their new hoax.
The shaman's horns are to the Capitol riots what the riots are to the virus. They are the flower the child in front hands you, hoping to misdirect you. It isn't just 5 people who died from Trump's lies and his supporters following them after today. It looks much more like 500,000. If horns and dietary preferences are the images you take away instead of bullets and dead cops, you've missed what really happened. So too, if broken Capitol windows are the image you take away from the Trump presidency, then you have missed the catastrophic mishandling of the coronavirus. But there it is again, mishandling, like misinformation, passive, like it wasn't a choice from the start. Friends, we have on tape that he downplayed the virus, that he knew how dangerous it was and didn't speak publicly about it.
You just breathe the air, that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
3 weeks later, President Trump told the American people a totally different story. Then on March 19th, with nearly 200 Americans dead, the president admitted to Woodward in audio obtained by the Washington Post that he deliberately misled the country about the danger.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Stay calm. It will go away. You know it is going away.
That isn't misinformation. It's more like manslaughter. If your friend knew the ice was too thin and told you it was safe to skate anyway, that is more like attempted murder than misinformation. If car companies knew the airbags had shrapnel in them but downplayed it, that's more like deadly lying than being misinformed. On January 6th, we all saw on live television the deadly nature of Trump's intentional lies. But on this grim day, as we cross 500,000 deaths, I hope we see the lies started on day one. It has always been before our eyes.
And they don't want to believe that COVID is real. And the reason I tweeted what I did is it wasn't one particular patient. It's just a culmination of so many people. And their last dying words are, this can't be happening, it's not real. And when they should be spending time FaceTiming their families, they're filled with anger and hatred. And it just made me really sad the other night. And I just can't believe that those are going to be their last thoughts and words.
Of course, it's fair to say that not all 500,000 are on Trump's hands. It's a pandemic. It's called that for a reason. People were always going to die from this disease. That is true, but it is important to keep in context. Those 5 people at the Capitol didn't have to die. Had Trump been faster to accept reality, they would still be alive. So, how many of the 500,000 would still be with us if Trump hadn't lied? I know really, how many? We can calculate it. This graph shows coronavirus deaths per million by country. Yes, the bar for the U.S. is massive. You may think that this bar is so large because the country is large, but this is a graph per million. Raw deaths by country looks much worse. But let's throw out some outliers. New Zealand did an outstanding job and are to be commended, but they are also outstanding, literally, in the water as 2 islands isolated and combined with a combined population half the size of New York City. Let's not compare apples to atoms. If we had handled COVID as elegantly as New Zealand, almost no Americans would have died. That's a great aspiration, probably too high a bar. Germany, I think, is a good comparison point. It is an industrialized nation that shares borders with other nations and has a large population, bigger than the entire American Midwest. Germany's deaths per million is 309 compared to our 955. At that rate, and I don't know how to say this, more than and 200,000 Americans would still be alive today. Forget the guys with the horns. Forget the tweets. Forget the personality. It was not just 5 people that died because of Trump's lies. It was more like 200,000. Can you even arrest someone for 200,000 counts of manslaughter? 500,000 is an incomprehensible number of people dead. 200,000 is an incomprehensible number of people who didn't need to die.
If you're healthy, probably go through a process and you'll be fine.
You take a solid flu vaccine, you don't think that would have an impact or much of an impact on corona?
No.
Some of them go to work, but they get better.
It'll go away. We're doing very well, and we've done a fantastic job. It will go away. Just stay calm.
You could object to these numbers and say we're not Germany. That's fine. If you run them for Canada or the Netherlands, you get 196,000 or 320,000. Hi, editing here. Since so much of this analysis depends on these numbers, I want to just take a second to talk about them. I pulled the original data in December from Bloomberg's website, and then I ran all the calculations again today and yesterday before uploading to sort of make sure that they're up to speed with the updated data from February as opposed to December. It's actually worse. So basically all of the estimates that I'm given in this video are conservative, which is just sad. It's just sad. If you're interested, I'll put the links below for where this data is from. You use the deaths per million to find a population adjusted estimate of what would have happened. You can project the death toll. That's the second to the left, second furthest from the right column, and then you subtract that from the actual deaths, and you can find a number of lives that could have been spared. The numbers are shockingly high for how much better it could have been. Reading those numbers conservatively, that is 6 Vietnam Wars, 50 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, on 100 September 11th that didn't need to be. Reading them liberally, that is more people than died in the nuclear bombing and fallout of Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. 2 nukes worth of dead Americans who didn't need to die on his watch. No. Misinformation is too weak a word. Downplaying is too weak a framing for willful ignorance and intentional deception that led to unnecessary death. Can we dwell on this for a second? The notion of a preventable 9/11. On one level, it's silly to even think this way, but there are merits to counterfactual reasoning. So just imagine something with me, as is the great fantasy of the conspiracy theorist. Imagine that President Bush, in fact, did have insider information about 9/11. Imagine he knew somehow the planes were coming. He didn't understand all the details, but his experts were telling him credibly that if he ordered an immediate evacuation, he could save lives. Maybe not all of them, maybe half. And he chose not to. He didn't want to be the leader who creates a panic trying to save lives. Better to lie and let them die. The ratings will be better. Then, imagine that happened 100 times.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
Dan, what a call from Washington.
Worse, even, because with Trump's lies about masks and the flu, he didn't just do nothing, which would have been an abdication of his responsibility. He made it worse. He had the rallies. He lied about the severity. Stay in the towers. America is strong. How would we have reacted if Bush asked people to stay in the towers, and later it came out that he knew they were falling? Worse than inaction is treachery. What he calls downplaying was, and should go down as the largest betrayal of American life in our contemporary history, deadlier to American citizens than the atomic bombs were to Japan. That is what President Trump did for a year. An entire year, he was capable of saving more lives, like he knew the towers were about to fall. And he told everyone inside, the fires will go away like a miracle. It will disappear.
We have it totally under control.
We think we have it very well under control.
We pretty much shut it down.
A lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat.
We're in very good shape.
I think it's going to work out fine.
Very well under control in our country. I think that's a problem that's going to go away. Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low.
He thought he'd covered all that there was to say in child development. But this was new.
Fred didn't become angry a lot, but he just became so angry about the fact that people would mislead a small child.
And I saw this new thing called television. And I saw people throwing pies in each other's faces. And I thought, this could be a wonderful tool. Why is it being used this way?
When I wrote the first draft of this, I really wanted to get back to Mr. Rogers. I wanted to get back to the clip of his memorial service that I put in the video last week. I had this whole thing planned, right? There was a story of how children were dying because they had misunderstood mass media. He came out of retirement to address it. He was angry. I even wanted to pull from his testimony at the Senate and direct it to our current moment. I can stop when I want to. I can stop when I wish. I can stop anytime. Please, people who have swallowed this misinformation, this big lie, you can stop anytime. You can stop when you want to. You can stop when you wish. I wanted to speak to people in kind terms who followed this man, but I'm not Mr. Rogers. I'm not a puppeteer, a songwriter. I'm not an emotional savant of the childhood experience. I'm a physics teacher who studies technology. I express my kindness to students sometimes by telling them hard truths, correcting their errors, and putting them in detention when they deserve it. So there is just one thing left. Poor Trump sheep, right? How sad that so many were deceived. They, the manipulated, deserve our pity, right? Some probably do, but let's not patronize them by calling them sheep. I think it's morally disrespectful for liberals to assume conservatives are merely manipulable sheep. If conservatives pride themselves on their freedom, we must not insult them by denying them their right to be treated as moral agents, by denying them their right to be held accountable. It doesn't matter how many flags you wave. Freedom without consequence is moral anarchy, not a constitutional republic. Americans, particularly in-your-face flag-waving Americans, pride themselves on many things. Being sheep is not one of them. So, to the alleged party of personal responsibility, a little tough love for the anti-maskers. If you chose not to wear a mask because you didn't think it was a big deal, you are part of this needless death. You broke the windows at the Capitol, too. It is not too late to change your behavior, but you were part of it. And if you might indulge my science teacher nature for another moment, if you continued to trust the scientific assessments of a man who publicly considered bleach injections, you may need to grapple with the willful ignorance that you know you chose. If you want America to be respected, if you personally want to be respected, do not play the card of blameless gullibility. Do not shrug off reality. Do not shrug off responsibility. You're smart enough. You could have figured it out before so many of my friends had to watch their parents and grandparents die. New technology always brings with it new kinds of crime. There was no insider trading before there was a stock market. There were no ransomware attacks before internet-connected hospitals. And there is always a delay in classifying these crimes. At a national scale, misinformation is a misclassification. The nation was walking on thin ice, and Trump yelled through the largest megaphone in human history that it wasn't any worse than the flu. Lying with such unprecedented consequences is a new kind of crime, one for which we need a new classification: complicit in manslaughter, accessory to mass-scale negligent homicide. The evolution of war crime is the cyber warfare criminal, the culture war profiteer. We didn't convict him for the riots. How will we hold him accountable for this new kind of violence that has yet to be written into the books? Deliberate Deception requires either sheep to follow or willful ignorance. Figure out which one you were. Take ownership, make amends. Maybe, then, we can prevent the 8th, 9th, or 10th Vietnam War's length list of needless death. The way forward, they say, is unity. But we don't get that when we are living in non-reality. We don't get that when the ice is breaking under our feet and we tell ourselves cold water is a liberal conspiracy. The fish has teeth. In front of it floats a very retweetable glowing light. I beg of you, please admit the monster has been floating there the whole time. When the stage lights shut off fast enough, the after image can persist in our eyes. Catastrophic and sensational and consequential though they were, please do not let the only after image of the Trump presidency be the Capitol riots and his subsequent acquittal, especially when his misinformation, his lies, have killed more of us than any enemy, than all our enemies combined in the last half century. Wear a mask, social distance, get the vaccine when it's your turn. I'm Charlie. Does that make sense to me? Thanks for watching.